The studio lights dim as the crowd settles into an expectant hush. A thin layer of anticipation floats in the air, thick with tension and curiosity. The atmosphere feels electric, almost cinematic, as Karoline Leavitt steps into view. She's dressed in a crisp blazer, her shoulders squared, her eyes scanning the crowd with the calculated poise of someone who knows exactly what they're walking into. Every step she takes toward the stage is purposeful, deliberate. She's not here to play along or soften the edges. She's here to confront. On the opposite end, seated confidently but visibly guarded, is Robert De Niro, the legendary actor known not only for his powerful performances but for his increasingly outspoken political takes. Tonight, however, there's something different about him. He seems braced, as if expecting a challenge but unsure of its form. He adjusts in his seat as Karoline closes in, her gaze not once breaking from his. The audience senses it, feels it, a clash of two completely different worlds about to erupt live. Karoline takes her seat opposite De Niro, and for a split second, the air between them is silent. Not even the host says a word yet. There's no fake smile or overly rehearsed banter. Just eyes locked, two minds already colliding without a single sound. The host, caught in the middle of this tension storm, finally speaks, welcoming both guests and introducing the evening's topic, a broad, safe prompt about American values and political divides. Karoline leans forward slightly, acknowledging the intro, but it's clear she's not going to let this be a typical polite exchange. She adjusts the mic pin to her collar and straightens the stack of notes she brought with her. Robert watches carefully, his fingers interlocked on the table, trying to read her moves like a chess opponent anticipating the first opening strike. But Karoline doesn't rush. She lets the silence settle just long enough to make people uncomfortable, and then she speaks. Her voice is calm, but laced with unmistakable intensity. She begins with a statement that sounds more like a warning than a pleasantry, something about truth, perception, and accountability in the public eye. She never breaks eye contact. The audience is hooked now. Phones rise slowly from laps, camera flashes flicker at the edges of the crowd. De Niro leans back slightly, his expression tightening. He recognizes the tone, the directness. He's seen it in courtroom dramas and political thrillers. But this isn't a script. This is real. Karoline, with just a few sentences, has shifted the energy of the room. She's not here for niceties, and she's certainly not here to flatter a Hollywood icon. She's here to test his words, his convictions, and maybe even his entire image. The host tries to regain control, to lighten the tone with a more neutral question about acting and public responsibility, but the detour doesn't land. Karoline answers briefly, then pivots directly toward De Niro. Her posture sharpens, voice steadies, and with precision, she delivers the first real strike, not a personal attack, but a pointed observation about how entertainers with powerful platforms often confuse influence with infallibility. The audience murmurs. De Niro raises his eyebrows, clearly caught off guard by her boldness. The battle line has been drawn, and no one is sure what will happen next. All they know is that Karoline Leavitt just turned an ordinary interview into the most unpredictable moment on live television. Karoline Leavitt doesn't hesitate. The moment hangs in the air like a held breath, and then she delivers the question that changes everything. It doesn't come with a raised voice or theatrical flair, it comes with chilling calm, the kind that slices deeper than shouting ever could. Robert, she begins, you've spent your entire career playing tough characters, fighting injustice on screen. But off screen, when the cameras aren't rolling, who are you really? Are you still the man you've portrayed for decades, or have you become something else entirely? The words hit hard, fast, without warning. There's no soft landing, no preamble to cushion the blow. The audience gasps audibly, their heads snapping back and forth between the two like a tennis match they never expected to watch. The tension that was already high now sharpens like glass, brittle, glinting, ready to shatter. De Niro blinks. It's subtle, but in that blink is everything. A crack in the armor. A pause that speaks louder than any reply could. For someone who's mastered interviews, award speeches, and decades of press tours, he suddenly looks caught off balance. His fingers, resting lightly on the table moments ago, now press down hard, as if trying to anchor himself. He leans in slightly, brows furrowed, voice low. What exactly are you implying? He asks, more curious than defensive, but beneath the curiosity is a flicker of discomfort. He knows this isn't going to be easy. And Karoline, She knows it too, but she doesn't let up. She shifts in her chair, not aggressively, but deliberately. I'm not implying anything, she replies, her voice still level. I'm asking what many Americans are thinking. They see you giving speeches, insulting politicians, mocking people who disagree with you, and they wonder, is that the same man who once inspired them in films? Or has the fame, the power, maybe even the politics changed the man behind the icon? Another gasp from the audience. A few heads nod slowly. This isn't just an interview anymore. This is a reckoning, not with his talent. Everyone agrees he's one of the greats, but with his transformation from beloved actor to increasingly controversial public figure. De Niro's lips press together. He lets out a short breath, leans back, and says, "People change. Times change. I speak how I feel." That's freedom, but his words don't carry the weight they used to. They hang in the air, a little too vague, a little too rehearsed. Karoline doesn't blink. She presses on, her voice still calm, but now with a hint of challenge. But is it freedom if it silences others? Is it justice when it becomes mockery? You used to speak for the people. Lately, it feels like you've been speaking at them. The host tries to jump in, sensing the heat rising and eager to steer the conversation back to safer ground. But the audience isn't interested in safety. They're riveted. No one expected Karoline to go toe-to-toe with Robert De Niro, and certainly not like this, measured, controlled, yet unflinchingly direct. De Niro, for his part, seems to sense the shift too. He's used to interviews where he holds the moral high ground. Tonight, he's being asked to justify it. There's a long pause, not dead air, charged air. He finally responds, "I've earned the right to speak my mind. I've been through a lot. I've seen this country shift, fracture, grow uglier. I speak out because I care." It's a solid response. It's honest. But Karoline leans in once more, not to dismiss him, but to hold him accountable. "And I respect that," she says. But caring doesn't mean condemning. Influence doesn't make you untouchable. Maybe it's time someone asked you the same tough questions you've been asking the rest of the country. And with that, the studio falls into a tense silence. No one knows who will speak next. But everyone knows, something just shifted forever. The silence stretches just a second too long, but Karoline doesn't move. Her composure remains unshaken, her eyes fixed steadily on De Niro, who now appears visibly uncomfortable, though he tries to mask it behind a slight smirk. That smirk, however, doesn't fool anyone. It's the kind people wear when they're trying to act unfazed, but the pressure is already creeping in. The tension isn't just between two guests anymore, it's spilled into the audience, into the millions watching at home. Every camera in the studio focuses in, and every breath feels amplified, as if the room itself is listening. Karoline's silence isn't passive, it's surgical, intentional. She lets De Niro sit with her words, feel the weight of the question she dropped moments ago. Then, as the silence becomes almost unbearable, she breaks it, not with volume, but with precision. "When you speak," she says slowly, "millions listen. But lately, it's not just admiration they feel. It's confusion, disappointment. You've become a symbol for something you used to fight against: division, disdain for dialogue, dismissal of everyday Americans." The words land softly but strike hard. Her voice never rises, never wavers, and that control only intensifies their impact. The audience doesn't clap, doesn't cheer. They're listening, completely. De Niro, who has always had the upper hand in public exchanges, seems unsure of how to counter this kind of calm confrontation. He clears his throat, straightens his posture, and for the first time in the conversation, looks genuinely unsettled. "You think I don't care about people?" he says, the edge in his voice betraying the vulnerability he's trying to conceal. "I've spent my whole career shining a light on injustice. I've supported causes, I've spoken out." Karoline cuts in, not harshly, but firmly. "Speaking out is easy when you have millions of fans applauding everything you say. But when you start using that platform to mock and belittle those who don't share your views, what are you really doing? Is that activism, or is it just ego?" That question stings. De Niro's jaw tightens. His eyes narrow just slightly. He's used to critics in tabloids, social media jabs, political rebuttals, but this is different. Karoline isn't shouting. She isn't attacking his character. She's asking him to reflect, and forcing him to do it in front of a live audience. That's a confrontation far more uncomfortable than a screaming match. It demands thought, honesty, and he's not ready for it. The host tries again to deflect, offering a segue to a lighter topic, but Karoline gently waves it off. This isn't about disrespect, she says, addressing both the host and De Niro. It's about a conversation that's long overdue. When people like Robert speak, people follow. So when that voice becomes angry, condescending, even cruel, those who follow turn that tone into action. And sometimes, those actions hurt this country more than they help. De Niro leans forward, his tone defensive now. You're twisting my words. I've criticized politicians. I've never attacked the people. Karoline nods, almost sympathetically. But sometimes, the tone you use doesn't make the distinction. And the people listening don't always hear nuance. They hear anger. They echo it. You helped shape culture, Robert. But now, you're shaping division, and maybe it's time someone held that mirror up to you. The audience is silent again. Not because they're bored, but because they're stunned. No yelling, no chaos, just truth delivered with razor clarity. De Niro looks at Karoline now with a mix of frustration and something that looks dangerously close to respect. Not because he agrees, but because she's done what few have dared to do, challenge him without stooping to insult, confront him without needing a stage. And in that moment, everyone watching knows, this is not just a guest segment. This is a cultural moment. One that will be dissected, debated, and remembered long after. The cameras stop rolling. The camera zooms in slowly, capturing Robert De Niro's face as he exhales deeply, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. For once, his expression isn't confident or composed, it's introspective, almost uncertain. He's in unfamiliar territory, not because he's never faced criticism before, but because this kind of confrontation is different. It's public, yes, but it's also intensely personal, surgical in its emotional precision. Karoline Leavitt sits calmly across from him, her expression steady, her body language open yet firm. She's not here for theatrics. She's not here to win applause. She's here to hold ground, and in doing so, shift the atmosphere in ways no one saw coming. The host, clearly rattled by the heavy turn the conversation has taken, attempts to interject again. Let's pivot a bit, maybe talk about the state of media today, how celebrities and politics have become so intertwined. But neither guest bites. De Niro glances briefly at the host, then back at Karoline. His voice is quieter now, his tone less combative. Do you really think I've caused division? That I've become part of the problem? It's not defensive, it's genuine. And for a brief moment, the audience sees a crack in the armor, a glimpse of the man behind the persona. Karoline responds without hesitation, but with a touch more softness. I don't think you started it, she says. But I do think you've stopped listening. Somewhere along the line, righteous anger turned into contempt. And when someone with your influence shows contempt for an entire half of the country, it doesn't heal, it hardens. The words are measured, intentional. She's not out to humiliate him, she's out to make him reflect. And that, in this setting, is far more disruptive. De Niro leans back slightly, processing her words. He nods once, almost involuntarily. I grew up watching things change, he says slowly. Civil rights, war, corruption. I've always felt the need to speak out. Karoline listens attentively, not interrupting, allowing him the space to explain. But what happens when speaking out turns into shouting down? She asks quietly. When being a voice of conscience starts drowning out the voices of the people who don't agree with you. There's a shift in the studio. A subtle change in the way the audience leans forward. It's not just a battle anymore, it's a reckoning. De Niro isn't dodging the questions anymore. He's considering them, and Karoline, sensing the change, doesn't let up, but she does shift tone, just slightly. You've seen the best and worst of this country, she continues. And you've inspired generations with your work. But imagine what could happen if you used your voice not to lecture, but to listen. Not to divide, but to invite conversation. It's not a challenge this time, it's an appeal. And it lands differently. De Niro looks at her, and for the first time since the conversation began, there's no tension in his shoulders. He exhales again, slower this time, as if letting go of something. It's hard, he admits. When you've seen so much, felt so much, it's hard not to shout. Karoline nods. I understand that, but it's the quiet voices people need now. The voices that don't drown them out. That makes space instead of closing doors. The studio is completely silent. Not a phone screen glows. No one whispers. Everyone is locked into this raw exchange, this unexpected moment of vulnerability between two people from entirely different worlds. The clash that everyone expected has turned into something far more compelling, a moment of clarity. And just when it seems the tension has finally eased, Karoline delivers one last thought. You don't have to change your beliefs, she says. But you could change your approach. Because people will always listen to Robert De Niro. The question is, what do you want them to hear? And with that, the moment hangs in the air, suspended in time. De Niro says nothing for a long beat. Then, quietly, he replies, maybe it's time I listen more than I speak. It's not an admission of defeat. It's a moment of truth. And it echoes louder than any scripted monologue ever could. The mood in the studio has transformed. Where there was once friction, now there's a strange stillness, one not born of fatigue but of quiet realization. Robert De Niro sits, no longer in a posture of defense but reflection. His usual sharpness, honed over decades of performances and interviews, has softened, replaced by something far more human. Karoline Leavitt, without ever raising her voice, has guided the conversation from a fiery confrontation to an unexpectedly personal dialogue. The audience, sensing the shift, doesn't move. They remain fixed, watching a scene unfold that no one could have predicted when the show began. De Niro adjusts the microphone clip to his collar, a small gesture that speaks volumes. It's the kind of movement someone makes when they realize they're no longer performing but revealing. His fingers rest on the edge of the desk, and for a moment, he looks over at Karoline, not with resentment, but with a strange, almost reluctant admiration. I never thought I'd be sitting here, being asked to rethink how I speak, he says, his voice lower than before, almost tentative. I've always spoken from the gut. Maybe I assumed everyone understood the heart behind it. Karoline doesn't pounce. She doesn't seize the moment to assert dominance. Instead, she lets the words settle. Then, gently, she replies, it's not wrong to speak from the gut. It's powerful, but sometimes, speaking from the heart takes more courage. Especially when it means rethinking the very ways we've connected with the world. Her voice is steady, but there's a warmth in it now, a sense of invitation rather than confrontation. This isn't about who wins the debate. This is about the effect of influence, how it ripples, shapes, and in some cases, distorts. De Niro nods slowly, his jaw tightening not in anger but in contemplation. People want someone to blame, he says, almost to himself. They want a villain. A scapegoat. I've never minded being the loud voice in the room if it meant people felt heard. But maybe I forgot that listening is part of that too. The moment is raw. It isn't the kind of clip that gets shared for laughs or outrage, it's the kind that gets replayed because it captures something rare, accountability. Karoline leans forward, her tone firm but not forceful. It's never too late to start listening. People still believe in what you represent, even if they've grown confused by your words. If you show that you're willing to listen, to engage, not just to scold, they'll follow. You still have that influence. The question is, how will you use it now? The audience seems to exhale collectively. Even the cameras seem to pull in closer, as if capturing not just an image but an inflection point. De Niro doesn't smile, but his expression softens. I don't have all the answers, he admits. But maybe that's okay. Maybe admitting that is part of the work. Karoline nods, her eyes steady. It is. And that's where real conversations begin. Not when we pretend to have all the answers, but when we're willing to ask better questions. The words hang between them, suspended in the hum of studio lights and the electric silence of a moment that everyone knows will be remembered. The host, silent for much of the exchange, finally finds his voice. I think we've witnessed something rare here tonight, he says, his tone reverent, subdued. Not just disagreement, but discovery. Maybe even a little healing. The audience applauds, tentatively at first, then louder, fuller. Not the wild cheers of partisanship, but the applause of people who've seen honesty unfold in real time. People who watched two individuals from completely different worlds meet at an unexpected crossroads. As the segment nears its end, De Niro turns once more to Karoline. I didn't expect this, he says. But I'm glad it happened. Karoline gives him a small, genuine nod. So am I. Because moments like these remind us that it's not too late to change the tone. Not just in media or politics, but in the way we speak to each other. No one claps this time. No one needs to. The silence speaks louder than any reaction ever could. The final seconds tick by. The cameras keep rolling, but the performance has ended. What remains is real, unexpected, unscripted, and deeply human.